Hello and welcome to BT Media's In Conversation With series. This afternoon or morning for my guest, I'm delighted to welcome RD Whitney, who is CEO of 365Media and co-founder of the Virtual Events Institute. RD has also been the CEO of the Validation Institute, Executive VP of Tarsus Group, and Group VP of Diversified Communications. Good morning in New Hampshire and welcome, RD. How are you today?
Great. Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm very excited because this is my first foray into jumping over the pond from the UK and talking to someone in the States. So thank you for agreeing to do this. So RD, obviously we're here to talk about 365 Media in the main, but you've got a fantastic and impressive resume, and I can't sort of move forward without you giving our viewers an insight into what you've been up to for however many years you've been doing it.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for having me on, Dan. I appreciate it. And nice to speak with your community. And that's what my background's all about is building communities online and offline. It all started actually when I was 25 years old and two brothers, really, really smart, great guys, Wayne and Marshall Cooper, came and bought a small publishing company in New Hampshire, actually, where I was raising my daughters. I had already worked at Wolters Kluwer and Thompson, and I had learned about specialized publishing and the great business models of reoccurring revenue and content, bringing people to the community. But here we had just a newsletter for the management consulting and executive recruiting industries, a newsletter and a directory. It was a format. And I remember Wayne saying, we're not a format company. We're not a conference company. We're not a trade show company. We're going to deliver valuable tools, resources to help people do their job better, stay in compliance, advance their career because of the content that we're developing. We're going to connect buyer and seller. And for me, that was like, I said, I'll take whatever job you got. And I took a whole level position.
Yeah.
And quickly became general manager. And in 48 months, it went from this small little sleepy publishing company to a $48 million sale to what's today Bloomberg. And that was almost 20 years ago.
Right. That's a whole other interview with you.
Yeah. So, but it was phenomenal. So how do you take a newsletter and then we should do live events? So we rented the Jacob Javits Center because classified advertising was moving from this little thing, from the newspaper to this new thing called the internet in new companies like Monster and Career Builder. And, today it's LinkedIn and Indeed.
Sure.
But it was an industry that was forming and we helped people connect with it faster, with that change faster. We were doing data downloads through Dow Jones. We were doing corporate executive board models before it was even a thing, with Gartner. So we were trying every format, and that was just so exciting to me. But what we were ultimately doing is building community.
Yeah.
And so I've repeatedly done that over the past 30 years in my career. A very good example in the accounting space, pretty boring area. You'd think it's well covered. Turns out we were able to acquire a newsletter for accounts payable professionals, right? People that pay bills.
Yeah.
Turns out there's 500,000 people, 500,000 of them in America, and nobody covered what they did. So this one newsletter people subscribed to that was literally in bankruptcy, we grabbed and we turned it into the Institute of Finance and Management. We started doing live events because they needed a place to form their community. We created a certification program in America to help define that function. And we created online resources with tools and calculators and things that would help them do their job better and stay in compliance.
Sure. It
took off, and Diversified acquired it, and then I was able to sort of build a business community group within there. So I've been doing this at Tarsus, helped do biz dev and helped build different community elements around that, and did some M&A, ran their online media. But how this all relates to virtual and events, so just real quick. So while at Tarsus, I was CEO of TSNN, the Trade Show News Network. And we were covering this new thing called virtual events, right? And the events industry was kind of scratching their head on it. Frankly, everybody was. It was clunky. This was 12 years ago. And, the tools were out and they were kind of misaligned. But I tried to stick with it. We did a research study on that, on perceptions of it. And it got a lot of traction because people were very interested in it. I got on the board of OnStream Media, which invented webcasting back at the beginning of the internet, and I served on their board. So I stuck with it. I joke sometimes on interviews that I felt like Noah building an ark, and it was bright and sunny out, and nobody really cared about virtual events, but I stuck with it and done thousands of them over my career. But COVID hits and everything changed. Suddenly people had to wake up to virtual events and the power of virtual events. And I'm super excited about what that means for the future, because we're being forced to do it now and things are being invented.
Yeah, and I think mother is the necessity of invention. You've probably heard that phrase. And I think, lots and lots of people I've spoken to that have had to either move positions and set something up, or within existing businesses have had to do this pivot, right? To working out how they reach these communities that they thought they knew where they operated because they saw them at a trade show 2 days a year, but actually now they're trying to reach them in different ways. So thank you for that. And that's obviously led to you taking on this position at 365Media.
365Media is a total service provider for virtual events, business community building, and audience engagement. We work with nonprofits, associations, business media organizations, and select enterprises to design, develop, and execute world-class, high-value audience engagement projects. Typically, we start with a playbook, our way of designing you a winning strategy. You then either take the playbook and do it yourself, or you engage our expert team of events and community building experts to do it for and with you. We are the leading virtual events consultancy in the world, qualified, certified virtual event professionals providing nonprofits and associations with needs analysis, planning, and execution on virtual events of all kinds. Members are intensely interested in original content essential to the growth of their businesses. Custom surveys are an ideal device for generating need-to-know information about what's happening or will happen in your industry or profession. We are pioneers of the virtual events industry. We have the best team of events specialists available anywhere in the world. Our entire team consists of CVES qualified professionals who have successful backgrounds in event organization and online marketing. We wrote the playbook on virtual events. Let's write yours.
Fantastic. I'm sure you've seen that video for thousands of times. I know it off by heart. Can you bring it to life? Tell us all about 365Media.
Yeah, so COVID hits, and 2020, I said, after 30 years, I want to bring some of these best practices to clients and I want to build my own business. And so COVID hits, and lots of questions came in because of my work with virtual events. Long story short, I got Michael, the founder of Ingo, asked me to be on a webinar about monetization of virtual events, and something like 15,000 people came on. Wow. And that was the idea, that sparked the Virtual Events Institute. I had done all these online certification programs. Cool. Literally, there was a need for education because it was happening right now. So 4 of us got together and launched that global initiative, and it's really thriving. But I'm on the board of directors, and I'm very proud to be a co-founder of it. And I think it's a fantastic thing, but it's not my day job, right? My wife wants me to work, so and I love what I do. So anyway, I started executing some virtual events, particularly for nonprofits, because I don't know how it is in the UK, but in the US, if these nonprofits can't fundraise, and if the associations can't do certain activities, or corporations that need to engage their customers, they literally could face extinction.
Yeah.
So I was very passionate about that, particularly with the nonprofits, and we started engaging them with virtual event services, and it really started taking off. My longtime partner, John Tilley, who had run 365Media for the past 20 years, built it up into almost 400 professionals, global enterprise. It was a media services company used by the major media in the world. Well, I met him all the way back at that day I was telling you about, that directory company. We used to collect data for the directory of executive recruiters and the directory of management consultants. That's where I met him. And from then on, every company I go into, he was kind of my secret weapon. If I wanted to build a product or do something that needed media services, I would bring his company in because it would just do a phenomenal job. He had sold off a big piece of that to a global organization and kept a lot of the best people and the brand. And the organization was just kind of on autopilot a little bit with some big customers. And he loved what I was doing, and the brand just couldn't be better right now. 365,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
That is literally what this is about, right?
Yeah.
It is about taking your community 365. So we joined forces 50-50, and I'm leading this new organization that helps associations, nonprofits, corporations use the power of virtualization to expand into online communities.
And you talk about you wrote the playbook, and we were discussing before that whilst most people in the UK will sort of understand what that means, but it's more of an Americanism. Could you bring that to life? What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Exactly. So you probably see this too. The very first question you get when somebody wants to know information about a virtual event is, what tools should I use? What tools should I use? And you really need to back up. It's all about the planning doc for this event. Like, what assets do you have to work with? And what are you trying to accomplish? You wouldn't build a house without architectural plans. You wouldn't go on a whole journey without a roadmap, right? So it's that idea that we're going to create a custom assessment and playbook for you. We actually call it a VCAP, Virtual Event Custom Assessment and Playbook. And it kind of helps back everyone up to the idea of, okay, what are you trying to do? What do you have to work with? And what outcome do you want? What contingency plans are we going to have? What do we want the post-event goals to be? And more importantly, like, how is this a step on the journey towards the ultimate goal of building community? Yeah.
And I'm right in saying then that you can work with all types of organizations. So it could be an organization, whether a non-profit or for-profit, that has an event, doesn't have an event, but it's got an asset, could have a newsletter that we spoke about before that serves a community, right? So you can work with different organizations.
That's the really exciting thing about the virtualization trend right now. I think it's as big as the .com influence. We have been forced to, and we are figuring out that there are many things that we can virtualize. My wife is a financial director for a nonprofit in America called Habitat for Humanity that helps build homes for less fortunate people. It's a hand up, not a hand out. It's a wonderful organization. And she works for the Greater Portland, Maine group. Anyway, they're doing their board of directors meeting now virtual, and she doesn't have to drive 50 miles up. And I said, what do you think they'll do after? She's like, I don't know, this is working pretty well. We're actually getting everything done. It's like, I think one time I literally got on a plane and flew to Vegas for lunch. How horrible was that, right? And now in COVID, I literally, and I don't know how you feel about it, I have never been more productive in my life. I can have 10 meetings in a day that are meaningful. I formed a global organization, the Virtual Events Institute, with two people I'd never met before, and one person I had, and two of them were in the UK and I'm in the US. I've never met them face to face. How cool and efficient is that? So I think, we almost every organization, has the components of building a community, and the virtual path is such a good way to do it. I mean, like, take a car brand in America like Subaru. People like to hike and be outdoorsy, and so they've done a really good job of kind of building that community of people to foster their customers and buyers. Why can't every commerce that exists do that?
And I guess in your career to date, you've worked with communities around the world, right? So especially if it's virtually, is there a difference in your opinion in terms of how different territories would try to mobilize communities?
Yeah, I do. I think different geographic regions or different places on the on that. I remember once when social media had, it was probably 3 or 4 years in, and I was a very early adopter of LinkedIn, and and got very hooked on social media. And I remember for Tarsus, I got to go over and train in the French office, do a training on social media. And first of all, I talk fast, and they had a translator. But I was telling the team about social media, and they were just looking at me sideways, like, why would anybody want to share anything? Like, it's like the whole concept, didn't even translate. But
you've got a team that understands those nuances, right? So
exactly.
And we hear this phrase or two words, data driven, a lot at the moment. Okay, so businesses of all shapes and sizes have got a bunch of data, and they're all looking at ways of how to, in the nicest possible way, exploit that, right? Whether it's to monetize or to just build more of a relationship with their community. Can you bring that to life a bit more, and how you might work with an organization? Let's say a viewer's listening to this and they're a trade show organizer, and they've done a bit of stuff online recently, but they're sort of maybe a bit lost. They've got all this data. How would you help them?
Yeah, we are actually working with one of the largest event producers in the world right now, where they can't do their live events. Yeah. And but they have the ingredients of community because of the data that they have and the activity of the community that's just surfacing there, waiting for something. So, you know, in the data is as simple as you have attendees, exhibitors, and constituents that all need to reach each other for whatever reason. You also probably have good content from the speakers that you've had speak in the past, or the connection to speakers. So you've got all the ingredients for community. In this case that I mentioned, the community themselves, the typical attendee of this large US event was no event, so they were constantly coming to the event company asking questions, because they didn't know where to go. You can't Google it, or you can Google it, you're just not going to get reliable answers. And so we've taken that, which is essentially Ask the Community. That's, you know, sort of a feature of Ask the Community, and created that as an online asset that's going to be growing and developing. So then when they do come back to live shows, it's a component of the community. And that's the point, right? So I've been in a lot of the large event companies, and I was kind of an annoyance, I think, to them, because I'd always be like, you've got a great event asset, and you can put all these things around it. Instead of thinking the event as the sun in the middle of the solar system, think of it as one planet. It's an important planet. It's probably Earth, right? It's a big one. And think of virtual events, you know, as maybe the moon of Earth, but then you've got all these other planets, like online education, maybe even a certification program. You might have lead generation products between buyer and seller. You might have an online marketplace that can function 365 days a year. So there's all these things you can put around in that orbit that strengthens the community. And then when we come back to live events, it's that much better.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's been, because, I don't know, certain companies and shows have obviously been doing very well. All right, so they'll be getting good margins, good sales, etc. I'm not saying they're resting their laurels, but they're like, you know, there's a phrase over here which probably translates over there: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think, but now, you know, if a positive has come out of this situation, we're hoping that actually they will, as you say, you know, communicate with their customers more. RD, obviously over the years, technology has changed dramatically, right, of how we can reach our communities. And people will speak to you and say, well, that's all very well, but what system do I use? Obviously you can help them. In your opinion, what's the process that you go through to select the right platform?
So this goes back to the planning document. So we really want to avoid that question until we understand the type of event we want to build. What are you trying to accomplish? What do you have to leverage? In some cases, if you do that, you could save considerable amount of money, because I think what's happening is people are going directly to the technology companies. And let's say you're the tech company, and they're not going to like that I say this. They do an amazing service, and there's so much innovation coming out right now. But if you go straight to the tech company, do you think they're going to offer a solution that doesn't fit their platform? And that might be the right answer. So plan it out, and then bring in the tech solution or tech stack that you might have to put together.
And obviously you're very experienced with all the platforms that are available, right?
I mean, I was on the board of directors at OnStream Media, who invented webcasting. They came out with lots of virtual event tools early on. You know, and there were some big obvious ones that came along early on, and there were some bad things about them. People got a bad first experience on some of the avatar-based virtual events. But what's happening right now, literally since March, is just so exciting and incredible. It is a slingshot to the future, really. I mean, the world has changed really, really quickly, and it's not true. I mean, people are making tremendous amounts of money
so good to hear about
with
that.
virtual events,
Yeah,
both on the attendee side and on the sponsor side.
Sure.
You just need to think about it differently. You can't translate selling that 10 by 10 slab
Sure.
of concrete. And I'm sorry, you used to sell that for an 80% margin, and it all was good, and it forgave all sins, including the fact that probably a lot of those exhibitors did not have a good experience because a lot of people walked by their
Sure.
booth or tried to come in for the free giveaway. In a virtual event, and you really can help. Like, there's no reason. Your vendors oftentimes are the ones in the trenches, and they're probably the ones with the best case studies.
Yeah.
And the best vendors know that you don't sell by selling, you sell by educating. So here's a really good opportunity to get your sponsors and help them become thought leaders. They will be considerably loyal to you, both with recurring loyalty, but also with revenue. On the attendee side, there's just some amazing examples that if you have the right content, the right time, for the right community, you certainly can, and people are charging for it, and they're making very good money doing that. And if you can have both happen at the same time, fantastic.
I think you're right. I think there's a nervousness from the people I speak to, and my experience of people charging attendees. Okay. Because I think, there's so many events out there at the moment. Why are they going to come? What do you think will make for a great event that people will be prepared to pay for? I guess content, but virtually, is there any other sort of tips that you can give our audience?
I mean, certainly anything that can help advance people's careers, help them do their job better, help them stay in compliance, help companies grow, bring sales to sales, organizations. Yeah. Any of those types of things, people will pay for. And any place where convenience can be brought to a situation. And that could be from developing a great online directory and then putting a nice virtual web event inside of each directory listing, for example.
There's some clever ways of doing it. Well, give me one tip of today.
Today's actually, I was just at the BizBash event, and I was able to grab some tips from some of the exhibitors there. And today's was about AI chatbots, actually, because there's a lot of questions that get repeatedly asked in your virtual event, and bringing an AI chatbot in can really improve that customer experience. So there's that. The other one I just really loved. I like the practical tips from Pathable. They said, just create a technical difficulty slide just in case, so that if you are having technical difficulties, you just literally bring it over while you're sorting it out. Like, yeah, of course. I love those kind of suggestions. So fantastic.
The pandemic has obviously decimated lots of trade show and other exhibitions in the UK. What tell us about the US and how that's reacting from an events perspective?
Yeah. Well, the US is not one country, it's 50 countries at times, and they each make different decisions. So this was actually the Tarsus's Connect event, which is just an amazing event every year where the entire event industry comes together, and meeting planners literally, reserve their meeting space. So it's a very important event for the events industry. And Tarsus has also recently acquired BizBash, so they ran the two together. But it was originally going to be in New Orleans. It takes over the entire city, but it got moved to Vegas, and then it got moved to Orlando. And I think it was just a wonderful thing for Connect and BizBash to move forward with an event. They wanted to really show the industry that it can be done safely. So, there were certainly temperature checks before you even stepped into the area. The hotel, of course, all their protocols have changed dramatically. There were masks. Everybody had masks.
Yeah. And this was a mass event, right? It's not just a few people. This is how many people roughly?
I think it was I would say there's probably a little 500-600 maybe. Okay. Normally it's like 6,000. Okay. So numbers are definitely
still a good number.
Yeah. And I love live events. They're such an important part of the community. They're never going away. Never going away. And I think a lot of people say, virtual events, you're trying to replace live events. That is not the point. It It is an enhancement to live events. It is part of the community. So anyway, I thought they did a great job. It's all obviously difficult, everything, there's friction in everything now, from travel to, trying to have a conversation with somebody with a mask on, socially distanced in an exhibit hall. It was done very well. What I was really hoping is they would bring that, that simulcast virtual experience over. And I think that's what event companies are going to learn to do very quickly, is to do the hybrid model.
I was going to ask you about the future of events and your opinion. So, some people are saying it's going to be more virtual now and a combination of smaller physical. And some people are saying, maybe because they've got vested interest and they're talking it up, that no, it's going to be big again. What's your view?
Yeah, well, my best perspective would be America. I think that it will come back as smaller events in the beginning. It is happening now. People do need to meet. Commerce needs to proceed. I think we learned that totally shutting down everything was a mistake, but we have to be safe about things. So I think that, along with rapid testing, is going to improve that. But I do think the future is virtual, because we've learned the benefit of virtual. I know you interviewed Simon, and Simon does the Charity Film Awards, and I don't know if I have these numbers right, but he couldn't run that this year, so he ran it virtual. He had like was it a 10-fold increase of attendance? And when he comes back to running that live, he's going to have that live audience, because people want that experience. But you've got this entire world that can't be there, or just happen in that time they can't be there. So the exponential effect of that is great. I have a great analogy for this. So I'm a good guilty Catholic, and I want to tell the Pope that we need to start allowing for virtual confession. And he'll say, why, RD? And I'm going to say, because it will take the friction out of it. A lot more people will try it, and you'll have a lot more people to convert.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. And I'm now thinking, why isn't that happening already? Okay. You mentioned the Virtual Event Institute, and obviously I have interviewed Simon Burton, who's one of the co-founders. But it'd be great to talk about why you got involved and why you think, I guess, validation or certification and those courses are really important.
Yeah. So throughout my career, I've helped create these national certification programs in accounting, in healthcare, in administrative professionals, and lots of different areas. And it has helped to formalize and share the best practices of that profession when there wasn't a way to do that before. So, like in the case of some of these accounting professions, you couldn't go to college. They don't teach you accounts payable in college. They teach you the principles of financial and managerial accounting and taxes and things like that. So there was no way to literally learn it except on the job. Okay, so here comes virtual events, right? Finally, we wake up, like you can do so much with virtual events, and we wake up because we have to. Yeah. And the learning is literally happening right now. The reinvention is literally happening right now. How do you capture that and share it? And the best way to do it is find people that are doing it in innovative ways, create a curriculum. Why do people run a 5K road race? Because it has a start and a finish line, and they get some kind of recognition for doing it. So virtual event skill sets, virtualization skill sets are going to be needed in not just event companies, not just companies that do events, but in every marketing department. There's 8.5 million people around the world that need these skill sets so that commerce can happen better. And so that is what I was most passionate about, being the co-founder of the certification program and having such a phenomenal team come together so quickly. Our CEO, Sophie, is just amazing at what she's done to bring this community together, and the team is unbelievable. So I'm very, very proud of them.
And they've got a great set of modules as well. I think module 1's obviously happened, and module 2's being released soon, or I might have got that wrong, but
I think they're on 6 now. Yeah.
6, fantastic. And they've recently just done a summit as well, so you're doing events off the back of it. So fantastic.
An awards program to recognize best
very
practices.
smart and very useful. I can't go with my first American guest without mentioning Mr. Trump. I'm going to try and relate it to what we're talking about. So in a funny way, his use of Twitter, right? He's built freely without a TV station, because Twitter has given him this platform to do that, an online community, right? Millions and millions of people. What's your view? What's your view on I guess leveraging social media to do that, and also how he's done it?
Yeah, it points to how disruptive it is,
Yeah.
and how it has taken the barrier out between. I'll use the trade show example or the events example between buyer and seller, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it has also removed the barriers in a scary way for the established players, for sure. I used to joke when I would speak that your biggest competition is going to come from a blogger in his underwear at 2 a.m., right? Because that person actually has best community ties to the audience, and they are untethered by any restrictions at all. And if they are bringing good value between the buyers and sellers, they have a community. And back then, so the barrier to entry to doing a live event, you had to take the risk on the hotel rooms. And now in virtual events, you don't necessarily have to do that. I have a friend that made a great comment. He said, when he was asked, how's your revenue doing in your publishing and event company? He said, revenues are down. Profit is about the same. It turned out after all these years, we've been working for the hotel industry. And, I don't, the hotel industry does an amazing service for events, but it's a very good point, And so to your question, I think the barriers to entry, the risks of trying things, it's completely gone. Yeah. You can go directly out to an audience. You can go live streaming. So you can make an impact instantly.
Finally, we're going to finish up. Obviously, RD, you've grown businesses, you've managed teams, you're managing team virtually now, which is interesting as well. I'm actually going to ask you about that. So I've spoken to people that have actually ceased operating from a physical office completely, not just now, but they've made that decision for going forward. What's your advice for people to manage teams virtually?
So before COVID, I read a book called Remote, which was written by the founder of Basecamp. And it was written about 4 or 5 years ago, and it talked about the advantages of remote work. And it was already a trend for sure, and there was definitely some disadvantages too, which they were creatively working through. COVID hits and everybody had to work remote. And I actually helped build a community with my colleague in the UK, Heidi Williams, which you should definitely interview, called Remote Work 360.
Okay.
Based off of this trend that's happening globally, where before COVID, employees were working more remotely from, and there was some hybrid going on.
Sure.
So I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. I think the productivity gains are astonishing. And I think it's also got some challenges that there are creative works around, just like there are with virtual events. So here in the same spirit of virtual events, all the innovation is happening. The tools are coming out. Yeah. So I think it's here to stay. I think it's exciting. I think it's great for humanity that people can, have whatever job they want wherever it is, and be home in time to have supper with their kids, have the lifestyle they want. So I think it's fantastic.
And what do you think makes a good leader? How should leaders lead, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think trust is the key element between a leader and the people that work for the organization. It's always cited as the reason somebody leaves. It's never financial reasons. Sure. It's always trust. And so I think that's key. And so what that means is like finding people that are passionate about a particular area and putting them on that with clear goals, and not having to monitor that, because they're so passionate about that particular area that the goals are the measurement.
Sure. And it's interesting at the moment, because people working virtually, you have to trust the people you've employed, and there's a reason why you employed them in the first place, right? Because you thought they were right for the job. And finally, who are your inspirations? Whether it's work or non-work, who do you look up to for sort of guidance and advice?
Yeah. So in a very like early high school, I read the Zig Ziglar book. Okay. This idea that you can get anything you want in life if you help enough people get what they want. I try to live like that. As far as people that I look up to, those two individuals that I mentioned early in my career, Wayne and Marshall Cooper.
Yeah.
They now own Chief Executive magazine, Corporate Board Member magazine, and they've turned those into amazing communities read by 3/4 of GDP in America. I mean, they're just thriving communities, chiefexecutive.net. So I follow that a lot. You know, there's a lot of inspiring leaders, CEOs, and so but they're my mentors, and they've been a real influence on my life.
And I think what you said about helping other people, especially at this time, is really, really important. RD Whitney, CEO of 365Media. Thank you very much for your time, and we wish you best of luck in the future. And we look forward to you working with a lot of our viewers and their companies over in the UK.